Welcome back to Delivering More, folks. I'm your host, Ben Alcar. We have an amazing show to bring to you again today. Thank you for consuming the content morning, afternoon, and evening. As always, if you could hit that subscribe button down below, that's going to help us out more than you can ever know. I have a couple guests with me here today. I got Aaron Hoffman, co-founder, back in the building.
I'm back, baby. I think I took about, 6 weeks off of doing these episodes. Been traveling a lot.
Yeah, we've been on the road.
I know, man. Been on the road. Been in Houston. I've been all over the place in Florida. I mean, you name it, man. I've been all over. So it's good to be back in Canton, Ohio. I'm really excited for this episode as well.
Yeah, and we're on the precipice of new dad life.
I got this book handed to me today when I walked in the office, The Daily Dad. So The Daily Dad, it's got 366 different meditations on parenting. So,
Meditations?
I know. Expecting here in about 6 weeks. I went to a doctor's appointment today with my wife. Healthy boy.
Yeah, by the time this releases, I think we might be on the due date pretty close.
Yeah.
So it'll be. Yeah. What do we got a guess on the weight?
Weight. I was a big boy, so I'd probably say something like 8-9 pounds. But he's supposed to be due on the 15th, and I came early, so I think he's gonna be here first week of September.
All right. Yeah, I think that's when this will release with the guest we got here. So this is gonna be big
awesome,
time.
Man. Awesome.
All right. And I think
enough about me though. Enough about me.
Yeah. Enough about you and what we got going on here. We have a great guest here. I got a multifaceted, I think we could call it, multi-hyphenated speaker, consultant, C-suite executive
of one of my favorite brands, Cinnabon, past brands, right? I mean, the amount of cinnamon rolls I've consumed from that place is just it's unheard of.
He's been all over the place. We have Kendall Ware joining Delivering More today. Kendall, thank you so much for joining the crew.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Of course, man. Of course. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in San Francisco.
Okay.
Ooh, nice.
Okay. How you were just out in San Francisco? Were you?
No, I was in Southern California.
Okay.
Southern Cal. I was in La Jolla.
There you go.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
A lot more beautiful there.
Definitely a different vibe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've never been out to California personally. I got to get out there though.
Oh, dude, great.
Yeah. Good
great
stuff.
State,
All right. Well, Kendall, I believe this is all our first time meeting, virtually, obviously. So, we're doing what we can here. But I do like to get a little background on the guest, get a little more familiar between the trio here we have going, and then obviously our viewership and our listeners, just let them know where you've been, how you grew up, and things like that. So I usually like to start here. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I was born out in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And from there, parents were in the military. So I moved every 2 to 3 years, just hopping around. So didn't really grow up in any one place. But I'll say I spent most of my life as an adult in Dallas. And then a few moves here and there. And then as of 2020, I moved out to the Bay Area simply because my wife and I had 2 babies under 2. And she was born and raised here. And we needed all the hands-on support we could get. Especially with all the unknowns during the pandemic, we thought, we might as well go now and just post up for a while and see how it goes.
That's amazing. What branches of the military were your parents in?
Air Force.
Air Force. Awesome. What do you have like a favorite place that you stopped for a couple years?
Man, it's all a blur. But as a kid, it was actually, I was like probably 10 years old, but it was actually very fun to live in Vegas as a kid. Just because all the fun places you could go while your parents are going out and having different kinds of fun. There's plenty of things to do on the Strip and all over Vegas as a kid. So that was pretty fun growing up. But again, every stop was maybe 2 years, max 3, if anything, and then, on to the next.
That's got to be challenging though, growing up in that type of environment. I mean, I'm not saying it was bad, but it's like, coming from our background, we just lived in Jackson.
We still have the same friends.
I know.
You're probably trying to make friends every new school, so that was probably difficult.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely tough. You missed out on a lot, but at the same time, you grew in certain ways that you couldn't have without that experience, and obviously created a passion of traveling and wanting to see the world and all that kind of stuff. So, all in all, it turned out.
Did you ever get the chance to live in a different country, or was it just stateside?
Just stateside.
Gotcha. Okay.
Awesome. What about a first job growing up? How did you have an early involvement in the restaurant industry? Were you a busboy, server, or anything like that? How early was our involvement in this industry?
Yeah, my first job was bussing tables in a restaurant, a small restaurant out of a suburb of Dallas, Texas, and started bussing tables. And then that restaurant closed down. I was like, okay, well, I got to go to the next restaurant down the street. Found another restaurant. Started bussing tables, then it closed down. And so, I started to think it was me. But then I go to another restaurant. I start serving tables, bussing tables, start really getting into the weeds of it. And I remember becoming a trainer of front of house staff, and something just clicked for me, and at this time I was maybe, I don't know, 17 years old. And it started to click for me that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. This is a lot more fun than, going to school and other things like that. And I was just learning so much, and having so much more opportunity within those four walls. And so I started to realize that I liked what I was doing, but at the same time, I was also traveling a lot for rollerblading competitions and just going out and filming and trying to stay active in that sport and that whole different environment. So it was a balance, all while also being in school at the time. But yeah, it all started in the restaurant for me, and my career kind of just took off from that first busser position. And I found myself doing all the roles, getting up to age 18, becoming a manager of this restaurant. I don't know why they gave a kid the keys to the place, but they did. And believe it or not, this restaurant didn't shut down. And so here I am, every job I've had so far up to 18, every single restaurant has just closed. And for some reason, I didn't see that as a bad thing. I just kept going. And so I drove down to Dallas, Texas, started applying at every job imaginable, restaurant wise. TGI Fridays, Chili's, Genghis Grill was the last one I applied at. Got hired on at TGI Fridays as a server, got an apartment all in the same day, found a roommate, just changed my life overnight the day that restaurant closed. And got to Dallas, started, waiting tables, doing my thing. And then all of a sudden Genghis Grill calls me, and they have a little bit better of an offer, but a little bit further drive. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go out to Genghis Grill, try it out. I love the food. I'm familiar with it. It was a small town brand at the time, so sure, why not? Got out there, started being a host. That's all the only room they had for me. From hosting, went on to serving, bartending, managing. And then one day, a group of individuals walked in and said, hey, we started franchising. We would love to have you come help us open our first franchise. And I just said yes. I had no idea what a franchise was. I had no idea where we were going. I just said yes and was going to figure it out later.
This is all basically before, you're 21, right? This is happening.
I'm still at this point, 19 years old is when I went and opened up my first restaurant for Genghis Grill.
Unbelievable.
All I was doing at 19 was drinking at OU, man.
Yeah,
that's all I was doing then.
That's a long backstory. I want to go back a little bit because I'm very happy you brought it up yourself there. The rollerblading career. I was very intrigued reading about this on your website. You're listed as a professional rollerblader. I just have zero knowledge on what that entails. So is this like you're racing? Are we doing like we had a roller skating rink growing up?
Yeah, like are you in a league? Like the professional rollerbladers league?
Are we four blades in a row? Are we 2x2? Like what kind of skates are we
working
with?
This was all like street skating and skate parks, right? So the ramps, the tricks, the grinds, all that. Now the sport started to die off in I think it was the early to mid 2000s. So like 2002, maybe 2005, I think is when it really died off. It used to be in the X Games, used to be on ESPN, and just started to trickle away, lost popularity for many reasons. But the sport is still like what I do today for exercise. It just hurts a lot more when I fall, but I can still do it, still stay active. But basically, I had two different sponsors. One of them was Rollerblade, who obviously coined the term rollerblading, and most people refer to it as rollerblading, but end of the day, it's inline skating, and rollerblade is a brand.
Okay.
They just got lucky with that association. But so that was my main sponsor. And then I also had some skate shop sponsors along the way. And together with that came a lot of filming and traveling, competing, a lot of, deadlines for promoting new gear or new skates or whatever was coming out at the time. So that's what I was doing. And I got sponsored when I was 16. So basically when I was 16, I started bussing tables as my first actual job. But I was also now a sponsored skater trying to keep up with those responsibilities, which also came with, confliction when it comes to scheduling.
Sure.
Yeah, that's wildly impressive.
I don't think I can even like ride skates. Like I can't. I'm so uncoordinated on wheels, man.
Did you guys? There was a Disney movie when we were growing up called, I think, Brink. Yeah, Brink. The blonde kid was the main character. I loved that movie. That was a great movie.
Yeah,
you remember
that was probably the furthest the exposure got, and then I think it just started going down from there.
Yeah, that was a great. I love that movie.
I'm very limited on this topic, so.
All right. Well, hey, we can.
It's a fun sport. There's a lot of dedicated individuals who've been doing it their whole lives, still professionally to this day, but it's no way to actually provide a living, right? It's not like the Tony Hawks of the world. It doesn't come down to that for everybody. But that industry is just so much stronger than rollerblading. But it was still something that I stayed very, dedicated to and made sure I could do everything I possibly could. But, fortunately, my career started to take off at such a young age that I had to start to, push away from that. And I couldn't go to certain competitions. I couldn't, create certain skating edits. I couldn't do that kind of stuff and keep up with traveling, opening up restaurants. So over time, I think by the time I got to 21 or 22, is when I actually had to, leave those sponsors because I couldn't keep up with anything they were requesting.
Just couldn't do both. That makes sense.
Yeah. So then obviously we can kind of move on here to your first major gig with the restaurant. You mentioned Genghis Grill, starting around 2007. The position you had listed on LinkedIn was lead corporate trainer along with consultant and operating partner. Initially, training to me is something I don't love or enjoy a lot of times, trying to catch people up to speed.
Like any role in business that has to deal with other human beings and like training them and managing that. I mean, hats off.
It's difficult.
It's very challenging.
Yeah. So
very challenging.
was that something you chose to do? Were you interested in doing that, or how was that for you?
So, I got a taste of it, when I was 17, 18, started to train front of house staff. And for some reason, I actually loved it. The idea of seeing someone come in with no knowledge or experience and you're teaching them the way of that particular brand and what you've learned in a very short time, and then see them actually execute upon that. There was something special about that moment. I didn't know there was a career in it, but I liked what I was doing. But at Genghis, when I went and opened that first restaurant, that's when it was very clear to me that developing people was something that fired me up. And obviously helping businesses elevate and grow. Like there was just this combination that I was starting to figure out as I went. But we opened that first restaurant. We had no manuals, standards, documents, nothing. We just all went together and figured it out in a small town called Wheaton, Illinois. And we broke all kinds of, regulations and laws of hiring franchisee staff and all the things you're not supposed to do. But because we didn't know better, we did what was best for the brand at the time. But fast forward, that became 40 restaurants after about a year and a half that I opened from dirt to finish. And then it became 105 when it was all said and done. And this is all by the time I turned 22, maybe almost 23 years old. And so I basically spent all those years just traveling around, opening up new restaurants. And if I wasn't on the ground, of those new restaurants, basically being a project manager, making sure they all got open and then training everybody, I was at the home office training franchisees, onboarding them, onboarding their management, and then also just leading all of our corporate training programs we had for our own units that we had. But we basically went from 7 locations to 105 in 5 years.
Do you think that experience helped build the foundation for you to actually run a restaurant, let's say a large enterprise chain? Do you think that was like the initial, that was the foundational point for you?
Yeah, that was my college degree, right? So during the midst of all this, I, around the 19-year-old, time frame, I was, looking at going to college. That was the next step in terms of what society told you, what my family did. Every single person went to college. And so I thought that's what I had to do next. But this brand was growing through franchising, and so was I as a byproduct. And, the founder set me down and said, look, I know you want to go to college. We're open to paying for some, if not all of that. And we can have a conversation when this is all said and done 4 years from now and see what role we have and try to have some conversations part-time along the way. Or you stay by our side and we will teach you everything we know from our college degrees, but also you'll be in the room for every deal we make, every negotiation, anything that's going on in this business, you are going to be a part of those meetings and conversations. And I chose the latter. And it was the scariest decision I ever made, but it was probably the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I mean, opportunities like that don't come every day. You can go to college. You can go basically wherever you want.
You can go back to college now if you want.
Yeah. But it speaks volumes to you. You see an opportunity, you take it. So
obviously coming up in my career, college would be asked about quite a bit. And it was an uncomfortable topic for me back then because so many people would expect that you were going, or they would give you crap for not going, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just made it a thing. I said, hey, I went to GG University for Genghis Grill University. And so many people would be, oh, yeah, that's great, man. That's cool. I went to so-and-so. And it worked for so many years. And eventually I just said, I'm not even going to bother because it's just embarrassing seeing all these people lie like they know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah. Jeez,
That's
man.
crazy.
They actually thought like it's like GG was a real university.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Many people just go right by them. They keep having the conversation. So
Oh my God, that's wild. That's wild. And we can kind of keep moving along through the career here. I think your next position, another brand that
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of. See, I think is the location still over here, right in the allotment, Jim? Cici's Pizza. Do we still have that right over here?
In Belton Village, Ohio.
Yeah,
That's where we're at.
I think
Yeah.
we have it right around the corner here.
Dude.
So, yeah, growing up, it was. I mean, I think we went there for summer gym.
Oh,
after
yeah.
2
That
days
was
for
a-
football. We're
dude,
putting down.
that
I think
was
at the time it was like $6.99 for the buffet and a drink.
How do you make money off that, number one? But two, yes, that was a staple. Dude, once a week visit, I feel like. That was like the spot to go to. If you're
Unbelievable.
hungry.
Yeah. How's your time with Cici's as a director of training again? And then my main question here is what's the favorite pizza? And then at the end of the line, that go-to dessert. I think you had the Cinnabons. I don't know if we can call those Cinnabons, trademark. And then you had the brownies with the powdered sugar on them, which is my go-to. So I'd like your input on those as well.
So Cici's was an incredible brand. And similar to you, I grew up on Cici's. No matter where I lived, there was always a Cici's there. And I remember going there as a little kid. And even my parents would go to some locations when they were in high school, right? The brand was now around for almost, I think, 40 plus years. But so anyway, so the brand was at the time when I joined, I went straight from Genghis to Cici's. I was like 23 years old, getting hired onto this corporate office, the youngest person there. Many people had strong tenure of 10 or more years, some 20, 30 years at the time. And so it was a very established and very professional brand. But the brand itself, within the four walls of the restaurant, started to get a little tired around this time. A lot of locations looked the same from either the late 80s, 90s. It really depended upon where you were at the time. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, but the brand was going after, at the time, reducing quality to save money. And that solution did not work out well. And fast forward, a new CEO came on board. And when that happened, I would say this is where my career really got solidified. And I knew exactly what I was going to be doing and what I was going to dedicate my focus to accomplishing. Is when this new CEO came on board, I was asked to go on vacation for 2 weeks to where I was going to be training the CEO one-on-one behind the scenes in various restaurants without telling the rest of the support team that we hired a new CEO on. Again, why they chose me is a big question mark to this day, but the 2 weeks I was able to spend with this person, his name's Darren Harris. He's now the CEO of Jack in the Box.
Wow.
One-on-one time with him for 2 weeks straight from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. That is the most information, personal and professional development I've ever received. And it was just in that 2 week time frame. But that 2 week time frame lasted so far my entire career now. And things I picked up from that conversation or what I learned or what he taught me, I've been applying ever since. And so that really changed my focus to where I knew I had, a strong opportunity to really grow in the franchising and restaurant industry. I had a good run there. That was a turnaround situation where we focused on increasing all the quality, adding more high quality products. We put our pizzas up against blind taste tests to Papa John's, Pizza Hut, all the big players just to see where we could stack up. And our goal was to get to at least parity, if not slightly better on some pizzas, but charge that insane $5 to $6 buffet price. But when you optimize your food costs so well, and the average slice costs us anywhere from 6 to 9 cents, you can afford to charge that $5 to $6 price point at that time. This is over 10 years ago now, but
wow. Is there one or two like golden nuggets you can share about what this CEO at the time taught you? If there's one or two big things that stand out.
Sure. One was to always own your own career development. And he ingrained that in me because at the time, and it's very easy to kind of fall into this thinking process, but I was always thinking, well, whoever the leader is, whoever my boss is, they should be the ones to develop me, right? They should be telling me things, coaching me, doing all the things that, you would expect. But his point was you have to own that. If you want to go to a certain, level in your career or you want to accomplish something, that's on you. You have to own that pathway. People like me can help, obviously guide you and offer advice or counsel, but we're not going to be the ones that dictate that and can't necessarily tell you what to go do. So you need to first map out your own plan and your own desired journey, and then come to me and we'll walk through it. But that idea of owning my own development versus waiting on my development was a key shift in my mind. That again, I took that and kind of ran with it, and with that mentality, my career only exploded from that time frame comparison to where I was at the time, right? The second thing I think was this idea that and I have probably like 30 lessons I could go over, but another one that comes to mind is this idea that whatever brand you are working at, that you're representing, are you really bought into that brand? Like, do you truly believe in it enough to where you're passionate, you love what you're doing, or are you here just for the job? Again, he asked me this question at the time. He goes, we're standing outside of a Cici's looking up at it and just critiquing some of the opportunities. And he said, hey, if I gave you the money, would you be a franchisee of Cici's? Without hesitation, I said, absolutely not. Hell no, no way. I would never do that. Now, that's not a smart thing to say to a brand new CEO walking in the door and for someone who runs all the training and development of the organization. But it was so honest, and it was because that's how I truly felt inside. But I was conflicted. It was a moment of, okay, now that I have acknowledged this so openly, what am I doing here, right? Do I care about this brand? And if I do, then what am I going to do to change these problems that I had just shared with him of why I would never, invest in this brand as a franchisee? And because his point is, look, if you wouldn't even franchise this brand, then we have a lot of work to do. My goal as a CEO is I want everybody to say, yes, I would love to franchise a Cici's if I had the money. And that there was a shift in my mind to realize that, yeah, I'm here for a reason. So if I know that I feel like the brand's tired, or I hear franchisees say they don't make money, or whatever I've heard or seen, what am I going to do about that? What ideas do I have that I can contribute that can actually change that perception to where now I can be proud of being a franchisee of this brand if I wanted to? So that idea of just thinking about, okay, why are you here and what impact can you make? And whatever you feel about this brand, what are you going to do about it versus sitting around waiting for somebody else to address the issues?
I love that. I think the first nugget you shared there is so on point. And our CEO says this. I feel like almost every meeting I have with them, he says, I can't want it for you more than you want it for yourself, right? You got to want to go to that next level, right? You got to be, want to go from busboy to assistant manager to GM and so forth, right? You can't just wait for things to come to you, which kind of speaks hand in hand to, you seeing an opportunity and taking it with Genghis Grill, right? You saw an opportunity, you took it. So I love that, man.
Yeah. I honestly, I didn't realize that Cici's had been around for as long as you mentioned. That is a crazy, a very long-term brand that I thought it kind of just popped up, really. So it's wild.
Wow, yeah. It's been around a long time, but again, we were able to rebrand it, get a new logo, get all new interior design work done, new menu items, just everything changed for that brand for the better. And that led to 14 quarters of same-store sales growth. It led to more internal franchise growth with our existing franchisees. I mean, just so many positive things came out of, turning that brand around that really set it up for its next phase. And they've been doing, well ever since. But going back to my favorite pizza, I'll say,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still on the menu, but this started to die off while I was there, but it was called the Ole Pizza. And it was basically a taco pizza. And it was something that if you knew, you knew, and you could request it, but it was never on the buffet. It was only by request only, but it was actually a menu item in the training material for the pizza cooks, but not many people knew about it. Reason being is the lettuce would start to really, go bad and wouldn't look as high quality when it's sitting out under heat lamps. And so it was just by request. That mixed with either the macaroni and cheese pizza or that barbecue pork pizza that we have.
Yeah, mac and cheese, man.
I know Aaron mentioned mac and cheese
whole pie of that right now.
I used to, if there wasn't a buffalo chicken out there, I would immediately request it. The second I got there, I'd request it and take the whole thing.
Jim, what do you like?
I was all about those cinnamon rolls.
The cinnamon rolls?
Cinnamon rolls?
Yeah,
all right. He's a cinnamon rolls? Okay.
Yeah.
So on the dessert side, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I will say those cinnamon rolls were the best. And I know I came from Cinnabon, but something about those rolls, man, they were very, very special. And everything at Cici's was made by hand. And this is where the brand never got the credit it deserved. A lot of people think, okay, it's a buffet. It's got to be frozen pucks and people are just throwing stuff on there. It's not. Every single morning, there are people hand making the dough, hand stretching it, chopping it all up, organizing it into certain, ounce of dough balls, depending upon, small, medium, large. All this work's happening. Cinnamon rolls, same thing, fresh dough made out in the mornings. They're laying it all out. Everything is made by hands. and then served for that, small price point.
You would not think that. For,
Yeah,
for,
we're
a
learning
buffet,
a lot
man.
about Cici's.
I know, man.
We're gonna have to hit the buffet after this.
I know it's right down the road, but yeah, you kind of answered the question too. Like, how did you guys make money off that? You're saying you're selling a piece of pizza, like at cost was 6 to 9 cents, right?
Right.
Nice
Very, very low cost. And everything was portion controlled and down to a T of, again, trying to reach quality, but maintain the cost. So that way the value could be there. And we did little tweaks when we started to turn the brand around. So like, presentations, everything, people eat with their eyes. And so there was a lot more, I would say, focus on keeping that buffet full at all times and certain placement and learning about what moves at your restaurant and what does not. And if it's something that is not a high mover, don't put it out there for show. We'll just make that personal pizza request for other people to ask for. But we also started doing something so small that I would say probably changed the entire perception of the brand. And that was taking a brush of garlic butter and just going around the crust of every single pizza really fast. But it gave that shiny, glossy look to it, and people just loved it. And now people are eating more of the pizza all the way to the crust, meaning less trips back to the buffet because people are getting fuller faster. And in our business model, that's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tips and tricks.
What was like the magic number of slices someone would get on average? Was 4 or 5 slices per visit?
It was like 6, just because they were so small. It's usually,
they were small.
Pie, and so it was probably 6 around that time. But when we like towards the end of the brand, we got to 14-inch pies, and so it probably went down a slice or 2, but yeah, usually you would see a plate full of slices rolling out, and then the pasta, the salad, and desserts and everything else.
Pasta was good too. What do you think you could put down there right now? What do you think, 8 slices, 9
if
slices?
we went right now, I think I could challenge that 6. I think I could challenge it. I think I could, and then I'm also including like 3 brownies and possible a couple cinnamon rolls. So we're filling
that right.
Yeah, I've seen you put some food down, so I know it's in you. I think I bet you get a full pie down.
Unbelievable.
I bet you can do it.
Wild. I do want to, we got to move forward here. We can and get to your first kind of position as in the C-suite, right? You move on to Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurt in 2015, start out as VP of Operations, move on to President and Chief Operations Officer, and then end up becoming the CEO. So I my first initial question, I kind of like asking some guests who are part of the C-suite, did you initially have dreams to be a CEO, or did you ever see yourself becoming to a point where you get to a position like that?
I did, but I thought I was going to be like 45 or 50.
Right.
And I got there when I was 30.
Wow.
It was one of those things where, one, I learned a valuable lesson, but it's twofold. Being driven towards, where you want to be is a very smart thing to do, right? If you want to become blank, then yes, work towards that and have that vision. And you got to start to, act as if, prepare as such. It's all a mental game, right? You have to make sure you're ready for when that day comes. Otherwise, if you get there or not, it's not going to go over too well. You have to make sure you are ready regardless of when that day is going to come to you. But again, I thought it was going to be a long runway. And so I thought I would have to keep, being a VP of ops at certain brands and bigger brands, and maybe one day get the C-suite, and then eventually, and that's the typical path. And so that's all I could look forward to. Right, the youngest CEO I had ever met was, the CEO of Cici's, and I think he was maybe 45 at the time. So I was like, oh yeah, so maybe I could get there in my 40s or 50s, right? But I got there when I was 30, and when that happened, the lesson was, title isn't everything, because if you set your mind on the title, once you get there, then what? What are your options? What are you going to do next? Okay, sure, you can go be a CEO somewhere else. A bigger brand, maybe a smaller brand, whatever you want to do, but it's now you're going to be doing the same work essentially forever. It's just going to be a different environment, right? And so the title's not everything. And in fact, this is a funny story, but that president and COO title was me pushing away from a CEO title because I thought I was too young. I thought I wouldn't be taken seriously. I thought I'd be like another, just person throwing CEO on their resume. Because I hadn't even turned 30 yet. Like I was just about to turn 30. And so it was more of a pushing off. But as we grew that brand, turned it around, I proved myself to the franchise community. Then we started doing other, smaller brand acquisitions and started having a portfolio of brands. And it just made sense for a lot of other reasons. But yeah, it was an interesting feeling to get there faster than you had planned. Because you just start to think about, what these next steps are now, and what are the new goals that you want to set out to achieve.
I mean, especially being a CEO of like I recognize that brand. I mean, did you run the same playbook you ran at Cici's for like rebranding it or like, I guess, modernizing the brand? Same playbook essentially?
Yeah. So essentially what Darren had did at Cici's and what we accomplished, I took what I could from that strategic approach and applied it if it was relevant. There was a few other things we had to do at Orange Leaf that we did not have to do in the Cici situation, but ultimately it comes down to listening to your franchisees and then figuring out what is it that the brand needs. Like, what are franchisees saying? What are guests saying? You got to find that balance. For example, many of our guests would tell us, hey, we can't just keep coming here for frozen yogurt. Like, you just have frozen yogurt. That's what every frozen yogurt shop has. You got to have other products. Franchisees are saying, hey, we have these large square foot build outs that made sense back in 2010 when frozen yogurt was booming and there was lines out the door and we have all the seating, but now we don't have that. We're still surviving, we're doing well, but we have all this dead space. Can we do a co-brand? And so this is an example where you take what a guest and a franchisee are saying, you find the overarching solution. And so we created a new brand that could be a co-brand for franchisees, but offer a new line of products to the guest. So we created Humble Donut Co. It was mini donuts and craft coffee. And when you mix that with frozen yogurt, now you have unlimited topping ideas for your donuts. You could take donuts and throw it with frozen yogurt and make a shake. You could do affogatos with now the craft coffee and frozen yogurt flavors. I mean, you could really do whatever it is that you wanted to do. And so that was our solution. And that's when the brand really started to turn around for the better. And we started to see, the stronger same-store sales growth. We started having a lot more franchisees sign on with us. We grew that co-brand model to 20 locations up to the pandemic. It would have kept going. But it was all about listening to your guests and your franchisees and then doing what's best on behalf of the brand that still, pairs well with your brand, and then go out there and execute it.
I imagine too, when you bring together a donut concept and frozen yogurt, you're probably getting like returning customers throughout the day, right? Because people are getting the donuts and coffee first thing in the morning, and then after dinner, you want a nice little sweet treat. Hey, let's go back to Orange Leaf. Let's get a little frozen yogurt to end the night. So that's probably a great method.
You nailed it. It unlocked new day part opportunities. Right? You're starting to utilize your inventory items more often because you have more things to sell. So yeah, someone's coming in at 7 a.m. to grab coffee and donuts, and they're back at night with their kids doing frozen yogurt, right? Or having a shake or whatever it is. And then we tried to fill in the middle day part by adding acai bowls. So now people who want to come in and have, that for their lunch, they could do that. So again, it was just trying to dial in the four walls we had, but not go outside and try to sell hot dogs and random things that wouldn't make sense. But we did what was best in terms of the reputation the brand has built, and of course the products that it served. Would it make sense in the eyes of the guests? And if it did, then we would explore it.
Awesome.
We said that it was going very, very positive, right? You were getting a lot of traction on that model until basically the pandemic. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, man. Like, what was that like for your world, the pandemic?
It was horrible. I don't think myself and the team at the time will ever get over what we were going through, only because it was so special in terms of where we were as a brand and what was happening. And, when you have that feeling amongst your team, especially those who were there for a while, it's just hard to describe, but everything was going up. Every nightmare we had was gone, right? Every enemy we had in the franchise community was now our biggest supporter. Sales were climbing. Everything was happening. We're getting a lot more attention from the media. We just acquired another brand called Old School Bagel that had 10 locations. We turned them into franchisees, started franchising them. So now we have 3 brands between Orange Leaf, Humble Donut Co. and Old School Bagel. And we had just booked our first franchise conference in years. And so in April of 2020 was going to be this big blowout, franchise conference. We had all these speakers lined up. We were going to launch new products, new logo, all these things were happening. And of course, in March, everything just crushed. And being in self-serve frozen yogurt, you can't do much because the guests can't touch anything per all the regulations. You can't necessarily serve anything without masks and gloves. And now you're going to take a self-serve custom-made experience and try to control it for the consumer. So now you have to, basically handhold them and walk around saying, what would you like, and do it for them. And it's just, the experience wouldn't work. And so it definitely damaged the brand. Obviously, everything got canceled. We had to go through a lot of furloughs and layoffs, and there's a lot of sad moments like everybody else had to go through. But ultimately, the franchise community could tell that I would have to go somewhere soon if I couldn't get, what I needed for the brand. Our investors at the time were definitely pulling out capital and trying to just preserve. And so I had a decision to make. So I made a commitment to the franchisees and said, look, I've been here for 5, plus years with you all. I'm not going to leave this brand until I find you a new buyer who's willing to actually invest in you and take care of you and continue this momentum whenever this pandemic thing passes. And so that's what I did. I spent most of 2020 finding a buyer and ended up selling to a competitor of ours called Red Mango. And Red Mango is owned by Bricks Holdings out of Dallas. So we got that transaction done on a Friday. And then literally that following Monday, I took over Cinnabon and Carvel.
Wow.
I had a weekend in between, simply because I've been, pushing that role aside, trying to get this deal done because my commitment. And so I couldn't start until I got that done. So it was a very quick turnaround.
When did that transpire? Like, we're talking April, May, June of 2020?
December of 2020.
December of 2020. So you basically, I feel like that might have been the worst part of the pandemic was, well, maybe not. Actually, I don't remember.
Yeah,
seems like a big blur to me.
It's
like
all
that.
blur.
Yeah,
it's all blur.
I don't even want to remember that. I mean, for our business, it's the same way, right? I mean, we were doing corporate catering delivery. No one's in offices anymore. We went down. I mean, overnight, 90% business gone.
Oh yeah. We dropped about 70% to where we were. We had a lot of franchisees who just got scared and shut the doors. Some were temporarily closed. There's a lot of issues that were going on, but rightfully so, right? Our supply chain partner had to bail on us, which when you're in the restaurant space, if you don't have a supply chain partner, you're screwed. So we had to pivot and find random solutions. There's just a lot of drama. And then of course, most of the solutions we found got, locked up on ports or delay deliveries. I mean, you name it, right? Every nightmare that could go wrong went wrong in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, we've had our fair share of issues at the port, right, Jim? We had our what was it, 2 years ago? There was that big debacle in the San Diego, right? That port over there. And we obviously procure, delivery bags from China, directly from China, from a factory there. And they got held up for, months, 2 months at the port there. It's just like we couldn't get our bags to our drivers. It's like you need delivery bags to do delivery. So I feel your pain there, man. But yeah, I guess going into Cinnabon now, we're coming out. I guess we're still in the pandemic, but it seems like everyone has a better understanding of what the pandemic is. And you probably have to rebuild. I mean, Cinnabons, I've only ever seen them either in an airport or a mall. What was that like, trying to get sales on, when no one's even visiting those places?
Most of the locations were closed because of the mall regulations or whatever was happening at that time. But, it's crazy to think about this, but at the time, the brand did not really have a third-party delivery presence. They did not have a loyalty app. They didn't have some of the basic fundamentals that most restaurants have today. But Cinnabon was Cinnabon. And the mentality for the brand was, we don't need that kind of stuff because we are a globally recognized brand, very beloved. Most people, if not all, know what Cinnabon is. And so they had that mentality. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but in the middle of the pandemic, you definitely needed that. And without it, you had no way to reach your consumers. You had no way to make that extra buck for the franchisees because we didn't have a place to start. And so it was really building up some of the basics like third-party delivery at first. And some malls were okay with franchisees operating as long as they weren't letting guests in the mall. They were operating out of their unit and then having third-party take it out. So we focused on that in the beginning. And then we started getting into first-party delivery, launched our own app, built up our own loyalty program, and started having more ways to, engage with guests. And luckily, because of our brand name, we were able to build that pretty quickly once we launched it. But it still took, several months to get that out. And it was too late, no matter how you look at it, just simply because most brands had all those things years prior to the pandemic.
Were you in the same situation like a lot of brands we talk with? You guys are just going to try everything and see what stuck and then just go with it? Is that what essentially, or did you see an opportunity before the pandemic for third-party delivery?
Oh, at Orange Leaf, that's where I was at the time. That's when I saw the opportunity. And so I was the first one at Orange Leaf to say, no, we're not doing this stuff when it came out. I think that was 18, maybe late 2018 is when it really started to become a thing, or at least was on our radar. And I said no to it at first. The team convinced me, and I said, okay, we'll give it a shot in certain markets and we'll go from there. But my thought process was nobody was going to be ordering frozen yogurt, to go. Like, how would that work? It's going to melt. There's a lot of factors. But I was proven wrong very quickly. The next thing you know, majority of our system signs up on their own. And so now we're kind of backpedaling and say, okay, let's make this a standard and let's get it out there, because it was changing the game for a lot of our franchisees. And from that experience, we knew that, okay, now we really got to lean into this, build up all the partnerships we can. add new products to our offering, and start figuring out what we're going to do about transportation. We can't just have our standard cup you grab off the wall and go fill it up and let the driver take it. We have to have something built for this model. So luckily we did all that work leading up to the pandemic and had what we needed to survive during those times.
I was gonna say, like, how did you guys figure out to keep the integrity of the yogurt, and travel well? Because I mean, we do some frozen.
Yeah, you get like
food delivery.
Cold Stone.
Yeah, it's like you
got
gotta have like the best bags to keep that food integrity. Like, is that like the biggest thing you saw? Like the packaging had to be corrected. Was it like portion size? Like,
it was all those things, but also we learned that every time we got an order, we would make it and then put it in a freezer for 15 minutes prior to the driver arriving.
Getting even more frozen.
And that helped. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect, but it was the best solution we had access to at that time, given the circumstances. And we were asking our franchisees to do a lot at that time and other investments. So we weren't trying to go find the newest tech or equipment to really do it the right way, but it satisfied a lot of needs. And so as long as the operator could do that in a timely manner and anticipate it the right way, we could execute that. But if it sat in there too long and got too frozen, then people would complain because now they can't necessarily eat it as well, right? But it was a balancing act.
I'm a frozen yogurt guy.
You are?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Me and Tori are, man.
I want to, going back to Cinnabon a little bit, Aaron mentioned, all these locations, as far as I agree, you see them in the malls, you see them at airports, things like that. As the chief brand officer, was that something you found easy to deal with? Did you like having a concept that's only in that kind of real estate, or does that bring kind of trouble or difficulties at some point not having standalone locations?
Yeah, it was a challenge. And so we started to change that. Most were in malls. We also had several that were, co-branded in Schlotzsky's. We also had several, non-traditional locations that were out there. So we started looking around. We realized that Cinnabon, their biggest opportunity was accessibility. Not many people had access to the brand. Again, whether that was not having a loyalty program, not having a way to order it on third or first party. So we started chipping away at all that. But the biggest issue was most were in malls. And not everybody's going to a mall as much as they used to, if at all. Cinnabon's frequency was basically 1.8 visits a year for the average guest, which means the average guest is visiting Cinnabon when they're shopping for Christmas, right? That's why it's so rare to have those visits, because many people will say, oh yeah, I get that during the holidays because I go shopping with my family, right? And so how do you change that? You got to bring Cinnabon to where the people are. And so we focus on things like ghost kitchens, right? Did a partnership with certain ghost kitchen brands and Walmart and started to take over, existing McDonald's locations that they were closing down and turning into ghost kitchens. So now we're advertising our brand name in Walmart, but we also launched a frozen food line in Walmart. So now we're pairing cross-marketing the guests that are coming in, right? So we started to think outside the box a lot more, just because the brand name had so much weight that we could pretty much put it wherever we wanted to put it, and people are going to be attracted to that.
Did you ever consider maybe a couple other product offerings? I know it's Cinnabon's cinnamon rolls. It's like kind of just, that is the brand. But did you ever consider like breakfast sandwiches or like stuff like that?
We did. And believe it or not, some locations actually have that. Some of the more non-traditional locations, we had some convenient store partnerships, higher end convenience stores. We had some partnerships where they would have additional menu offerings. Overseas, that's where the game changes. Most Cinnabons overseas have a ton of other items than the US, but in the US, it usually just didn't work from a sales standpoint for the brand to do that. Aside from having the cinnamon roll, which is the bread and butter, and then of course, a few, coffee products and shakes and other smaller items. I mean, that's really what people go there for, is that indulgent experience of the cinnamon roll. But we did that. We also started realizing that we can't keep growing the same way we've always have been growing. So we started looking at more street side opportunities. But from the data and looking around, if we took Cinnabon and put it in a shopping center, with the volumes we had, it probably wouldn't last that long, because you don't have the captive audience that you have in a mall.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, what can we do? Well, yeah, we can co-brand. I mean, we did co-branding, tri-branding, quad branding, simply because we were owned by Focus Brands, and Focus Brands has, Jamba, Carvel, Schlotzsky's, all these different brands. So and Auntie Anne's, which is another huge co-brand partner for that brand. But co-branding wouldn't be enough. So we thought, okay, why don't we, since I was leading two brands, Carvel and Cinnabon, we said, hey, let's bring these two brands together, but actually create a new concept. And so a lot of the work was spent trying to figure out what menu could these two brands produce that was a different experience. Still take the best qualities of both and that recognition of each brand name, but create a new experience. And that concept was called Cinnabon Swirl. And it was this idea that now we could have different real estate opportunities by having this new concept and maybe even add a drive-through on it. And that just starts to generate more traffic and revenue. So we started to figure out different ways to grow in our physical presence as well.
Making it easier for consumers like us to not have to go. Like, I haven't been to a mall. I don't know how long it's been since I've been to a mall.
We're literally a half a mile away.
I haven't been to a mall in years. And like, I would, every time I go to the mall, I mean, a couple of our buddies, we went to high school together, so a couple of our buddies would work at Cinnabon, and I'd stop over and see Joey and Tanner every single time and get a Cinnabon. Yeah. Every time I was at the mall. So, but yeah, I don't go to the mall anymore, so I don't even see the brand. To be honest, like,
yeah, it's tough. I mean, the brand does over $2 billion a year collectively, but a lot of that is coming from what the brand has built in terms of the other products it can sell through retail. Right. There's a presence in Target and Walmart and all these big brands out there. And we also sell, other products like coffee. Like, there's a lot that the brand produces. And so the brand name is always active somewhere in the communities. But from the physical location standpoint, that's a challenge. Like, how does a franchisee drive more guests into their building in that environment? So we had to take it outside. But what we learned, what I was getting at, is Cinnabon couldn't do it by themselves, but Carvel could. Carvel is all over the East Coast, downtown New York City. Like, it can stand by itself, but many people don't know about that brand, right? That brand's been around for over 90 years. It's actually the creator of soft serve ice cream. And it's so special, but not many people know about it. But if you took Carvel and put it in California, it wouldn't do well because no one's ever heard of it. If you put Cinnabon on the East Coast with Carvel, now you're talking, right? Now you're getting some attention and vice versa. And so the idea was to, again, leverage both brand names to attract more of an audience, no matter where we put those locations.
Obviously, you went sort of like from the minors to the majors here. I'm not saying no knock on Orange Leaf, right? But it's a different business than working for a company like Focus Brands, when they own these brands. Like, were there any big differences that you saw, like where the stakes were higher, or like talking to that board was different than talking to Orange Leaf? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. It definitely was a shock, not only because of the brand size and, I looked up to Focus Brands in my career prior. Like, I looked up to it as like the model that I wanted to get Orange Leaf to. And we were kind of well on our way there, but obviously nothing of that scale. But I was learning from their best practices, right? And learning from their leaders. Same thing with Inspire Brands, right? Just watching that from afar. And so when I got there, it was interesting because I had to start remotely. And I think this is what made it more difficult for me to kind of find my place and get to know everybody, is because we couldn't meet in person. We had a travel ban. There was no vaccine yet. It was just a bunch of Zoom meetings, right? And sure, you can get to know each other to some degree through a screen, but until you actually meet them in person, it's hard to get in the trenches with them. It's hard to, fight this pandemic together and help save franchisees when nobody knows each other, right? Everybody on the team knew each other, but I didn't know anybody on the team. So that was a challenge. I mean, it wasn't until I think maybe 5 months in, maybe 6 months in, I was actually allowed to go and travel and start to meet some of my team. And that was just on one brand. I still had Carvel that I had to go meet, several months later. And so it was tough just because the brand was a lot bigger than I had realized. And it meant a lot of franchisees, which was a given, but I didn't realize how many single unit franchisees we had. So there's a lot of people to meet, right? It wasn't just a bunch of large groups that had, hundreds of units. It was a lot of, hey, I have one location, I have two locations. And over time, we started to bring in some bigger players that, offset that a little bit. For the most part, there's a lot of people to meet and a lot of just Zoom meetings. And it was kind of exhausting, right? Just doing Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom, talking and introducing yourself over and over again without being able just to go on, to a conference or to a meeting or to one-on-one session, just, start to meet the masses, right? I would say the expectations were definitely different. And so end of the day, you're trying to now drive in this setting, you're trying to drive more so the valuation of the brand, right? You're trying to figure out how much value can you add to the brand, but also how much can you save to make sure that, it's positioned strong in the marketplace. You're also trying to now work cross-functionally more than you ever had, because you have shared services, you have category services, you have your brand teams, but you also have a lot of co-branding, quad branding, all these things are happening. And so you're all kind of working together. And in this position that I was in, not only was I leading these two brands, but all the brand presidents were in their own, meeting and council to where we're all talking about each other's brands together, right? We're all trying to figure out how to help each other and what's best. And so there's a lot of just shifting mindset of, okay, Carvel today, Cinnabon now, and now it's all collective brands, and a lot of bouncing around. So it definitely was a big eye opener going from the environment I was in to this one. And from a board perspective, yeah, you're definitely talking about a lot higher caliber. I mean, my first board meeting, I walked into it, and I hadn't known some of the people on the board, but I walked into it, and Paul Brown's sitting in the room, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Inspire Brands. And I was so confused because, I had no idea that he was involved. And so, yeah, you get a little starstruck by some of that, and it kind of throws you off a little bit. But at the end of the day, I just had to keep reminding myself, hey, every time, you get to a new spot, you're there for a reason. Just remember why you're here and deliver what you came here to deliver. And so once you come with that right confidence and you get past all the surprises, end of the day, people care about how the franchisees feel, and they care about how much, EBITDA we're producing, how much revenue we're driving, and what are we going to do to keep growing that. But I will say the expectation and the demand and the goals were a lot higher and more difficult to achieve in that environment.
Was that like your welcome to the show, essentially, when you walked into that? When you walked
call up.
Is that like, hey, rookie, welcome to the league?
It was. And I mean, I was looking around and I recognized so many faces of people I didn't meet, but I knew who they were from other brands, and just keeping up with the industry. And so it was almost like a little like, is this a joke? Like, is you guys supposed to be intimidating me here? Because you're doing a good job at it.
Oh my God. We're Aaron mentioned it. Your history in restaurant industry is so extensive. So we're just now caught up to where we're at today, right? So as far as I can see, we're now a board member at Knuckies Hoagies, and a much smaller concept. As far as I can see, they're only in Georgia. You maybe correct me if I'm wrong there, but are you like pleasantly surprised going back to a smaller concept, or how do we feel reverting back to being so integral to such a more like a startup company?
Yeah. So right now, I've just been doing, I had a short stint in the fitness space. That brand sold, we exited that. And so most of this year, I've just been doing keynote speaking and consulting. But the Knuckies Hoagies brand is incredible, and I'm there for advice and counsel and franchise growth and just been supporting them. But it's actually it's owned and founded by a former franchisee of mine at Orange Leaf.
Oh wow!
The operator who leads the operations of that brand used to be on my ops team at Orange Leaf, and so I was there kind of helping form that relationship and approving that and letting them go do their own thing. And they have an incredible story where they had created this brand together out of need during the pandemic, and really created something special using some proprietary recipes and dough quality that we had from a different brand. So long story short, this brand is going to blow up. It's going to be another household name, and they have only 5 units operating today. But I'm not going to jinx it, but we have an LOI out and almost signed a 40-store deal with a major franchise operator who has a lot of other national brands as well. And so this 5-unit chain created by 2 guys out of need during the pandemic is now going to be almost 50, because they have another 5 agreements signed from their own efforts of individual franchisees. So, fast forward a couple of days or weeks from now, it'll be a 50-unit brand and counting. And this is with no franchise shows yet. This is with no franchise marketing. They have not done anything but organic growth and having the right conversation. So they're close friends, and people in my circle who I have stayed close to and really been helping and guiding, and vice versa. We've kind of always been there for each other, no matter what roles we were in or what the company was. And now I'm just trying to help put their best foot forward as they step into this next phase. But it isn't a board member advisory position. And I'm doing the same with another company called Milagro, which is a restaurant technology company that essentially has all technology needs for the restaurants in one platform. So that way you don't have all these various vendors to work through, and everything's integrated. And again, it's a lot less stressful and more affordable when you do it that way, because you're not relying on just one product. But they're big component is the CDP, where they actually have all relevant data from every consumer that comes in your restaurant. So that way you're marketing to them in a way that matters, right? You're speaking to them based upon their purchase history, not just a blanket offer. And so you have different ways to market and interact based upon what you know these guests are coming to you for in the first place. So right now, a lot of my time is consumed by those two different board positions.
That's impressive. Hopefully Knuckies makes their way up to the Midwest, get a little Canton, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio location, Columbus, Ohio, something. Maybe we can get a word in there with them.
I don't want to cut us short, man. Kendall, we might have to have like a part 2 of this. But this is getting
I'm
really good.
I'm happy to do a part 2.
Man, because I mean we're at time already. I've got to get.
We gotta get out of
I
it?
have to get into one. You can finish up,
All right.
but yeah, Kendall, I think we should do like a part 2 of this because there's more specific questions we want to ask you around not just your history, right? Just about where you see the industry going. Operational questions, catering, our favorite topic.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about 3PD, but obviously that's our bread and butter, so we got to touch on that a little bit.
But yeah, this was one of the most engaging, enjoyable episodes I think I've done.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'm happy to do another episode. I have something else too, right at 9:00 my time, so I'm sure I'm a little late. Yeah, I am. So if you guys want to rebook another session soon, we can do that. If I need to throw on the same shirt, whatever we got to do.
We'll do like, hey, we'll say we're going to do part 2.
Yeah. Well, yeah, part 2. We'll put this one out maybe, and maybe by that time we'll already recorded part 2. Maybe we just run it continuously.
No, dude, I think we're like just 2
Yeah,
parts.
we'll figure it out. Yeah, Kendall, we appreciate your time
Thank you,
today, man. You get to that meeting. Thank you so much, and we'll see everything soon.
Thanks, Kendall.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.